Hello, this is Catherine Dubberly, the Answer Lady. Today I'm going to make some mock ribbing using a knitting loom. Let's see how that works. I'm working on a mock ribbed hem here. Mock ribbing is fundamentally using an every other needle stitch for a while at the beginning of a project, and after a while, several rows, you hang the cast on so that you've got a doubled situation, and the fact that it's every other needle creates channels between the columns of stitches that resembles true ribbing, though it is not. Of course, since it isn't, it still rolls like that, and that's why we're going to eventually hang this cast on to the inside of the fabric. This is something that machine knitters do a lot, but I don't know that loom knitters have really caught on to it, and I thought I'd experiment with it. And I actually normally do the U-stitch on this. However, I was afraid that with only every other stitch in work, the U-stitch might make it too tight hem for the hat that I have in mind. So here is my idea. We're going to try it with an E-wrapped every other needle hem. So we'll hang our E-wraps eventually on the needles that are not now in work, such as that one. And we'll then have a doubled hem that will resemble but not be true rib, but no purling was used. I am working with a very, very soft, loosely spun and also recycled yarn, so it's making my work a little bit tricky. Also, this is a small gauge kiss loom with the compact design, the sideways turned pegs. So there isn't a great deal of room to work. However, I have my boards adjusted out so that I can knit this bulky yarn without a problem, and that's working fine. However, any trouble that you see me having getting my wraps neat is mostly due to the recycled, soft, loose nature of this yarn. So what I'm going to do is go around E-wrapping every other needle and knitting them until I have about 16 rows knitted in this fashion, and I'll see you then, and we will hang this hem. 16 hem rows are finished, and all I need to do now is hang it. This is important. This is the yarn tail that began my cast on, so it tells us where the first stitch is, and so I need to hang this E-wrap on the first empty needle. I've got the hem folded up and tucked inside the loom, and I need to find my yarn tail to tell me where I am. There's my first E-wrap that should be hung on this peg, which previously has not had a stitch on it. I'm going very carefully between the two pins, trying not to catch it. The second E-wrap needs to be hung on the next of the empty pegs. Same thing, be very careful not to catch on the pins. And to remind you, the reason that we used E-wrap stitch not only for the cast on, but for the first hem rows, all of the hem rows, the first 16 rows, is that E-wrap stitch is a little bit larger and stretches wider than the U-wrap stitch with which I'm going to make the rest of the hat. And therefore I thought that it would be a nice compromise, since we're only using every other needle. It would allow enough room to get the head in, but it would still pull in a little bit. True 1x1 ribbing, of course, pulls in but stretches back out more than mock ribbing will do. So I'm going to work all around the loom, hanging an E-wrap from the initial edge on every single previously unused peg. I'm over to the second side of the loom now, and from this angle you can see a little bit better how to find the E-wrap and get it between these pins and hung on the empty pegs. See it popping up there? Slide it through, hang it on. Now there's a stitch on every needle, every peg. Actually, what there is a stitch on every other peg and an E-wrap on the others, but they'll function fine for our next row of knitting. Now I'm going to proceed with the U-wrap that I would normally use and knit everything over the U's normally, and I'm going to do that for the rest of the hat. Just like that. First row you have to be a little bit careful, and the E-wraps may sometimes feel tighter than a regular stitch, but they're working fine. Our hat is finished. Here's the mock ribbing complete, and you can see it does resemble true ribbing, but when it's pulled sideways there would be a column of purl stitches in there if it were true ribbing, and instead there are those little bars. But this is doubled and it's nice and cozy. And now you can see why I elected to use the E-wrap stitch for the ribbing while I was using the U-stitch for the top part of the hat. Even so, because of using every other needle, the hat pulls in a little bit at the edges, which is fine, but we wouldn't want it to pull in more than this because it wouldn't fit the head it was intended for. And mock ribbing doesn't have the amount of elasticity that true ribbing does. So E-wrap stitch, being a little bit looser stitch, if we're using every other needle, seems to work really well to match up with the stockinette top. Here's the finished hat on a head, and you can see how the mock ribbing stretches out to accommodate the head.